And now, Chapter 27 of The Last Boy on Earth, The Doctor's Tale. From the Journal of Brady Smith. I know two things now that I didn't know before. First, I think I'm responsible for summoning the monster Grendel into the world. I remember how I felt when I found everyone dead and how freaked out I was. I remember wishing so hard that I had someone to blame for all the death. And I think that it was at that very moment that Grendel appeared in this world. He didn't have a body, so he took the closest, easiest host he could find, that of Dr. Peter Grindle. I also know that I was able to summon the giant statue of Paul Bunyan to the river by imagining him there. I thought of him at the river, and for a second or two I demanded that he was there in my mind, and then he was. That's 2 for 2. But once I discovered that I had the power of converting my thoughts to reality, I was frozen in fear. My nightmare could come true. How do you stop yourself from imagining terrible things anyway? And then I thought, why not try to imagine Grendel as dead? I tried it, but it didn't work. So I'm no Harry Potter, and if I'm going to beat the monster I created, I'm going to have to beat him some other way, without magic or telepathy or whatever the heck it is I have now. I was on the riverbank as the giant statue of Paul Bunyan lifted Grendel's expanded form above his head and threw him, like a watermelon, into the great river. It bubbled and boiled and gave off the best light show I've ever seen, even better than the 4th of July fireworks on the Joshua Chamberlain Bridge. Whatever Grendel was, the water seemed to erase him. He disappeared, leaving only the nearly dead form of Dr. Grindle floating in the water. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be back at the Bangor Public Library sitting with a cold Coke, writing in this journal again. The autobiography of Benjamin Franklin has told me that it's always darkest before the dawn, and I think that's really true. Just before sunrise, Grendel was defeated. The weredogs slipped back into the forest. Their leader, who I named Fenris, was nearly dead, but while our backs were turned trying to rescue Dr. Grindle, he must have had enough life in him to wander off and die. There's still no way he could have survived Joe's shotgun blast. Still, I'll write it down so I don't ever forget. That animal had a human hand. And how did that happen? I wonder sometimes how things are changing. By what strange process can a dog change into something human? Originally, I thought it must have all come from Grendel, but Joe insists that the old world of the ancients was real, and that science came on board and eventually dismissed most of what they believed as superstition, or religion claimed it was false. Magic, he says, may have been a real thing. It might even be explainable someday when our knowledge of things improves. He thinks that the world's reset button has been pressed. What matters now is that we have to learn to live in this new, changed world, even if we don't understand it. We have to learn to live within this world, or it will kill us. As the sun rose, the general gathered his troops around us and said goodbye for now. "We are weary from our battle and must retire to regain our strength," he said. I asked what that meant, and he explained that they needed to return to their pedestals to recharge their powers. It's like plugging in your cell phone to recharge it, I guess. "How long will that take?" I asked. "We don't know," he answered. "We've never done this before. It might take a day, a week, a year, or a century. Do not be surprised if, when you visit us, we appear to be nothing but statues. We will be sleeping." It made sense to me. Every living thing has to sleep, so why not this metal band of warriors? And now, to be honest, that giant statue of Paul Bunyan was still freaking all of us out. He was one of the good guys, but he had that stupid grin wiped across his face like the other statues. He never blinked, and still, because he was so large, he was a little frightening, even to us. And that's when Kaylee walked over to Joe, who was standing quite near the giant, looking up at him. Joe says, "Did you know that his head is attached to his body by a long metal rod that connects to his butt?" And Kaylee answered in her usual serious tone, "Really? I wondered why Brady walks that way." And after they both had a good laugh on me, Joe continued, "How all of this manages to bend without cracking or breaking, Makes no sense. The tolerances shouldn't allow it. Cast bronze is just as brittle. I've studied science and engineering all my life. I'm here to tell you, this doesn't make any sense at all. Well, answered the general, how then do you explain a bag of water and various assorted trace minerals being able to write Hamlet or a symphony? We're all moving, and we like to think we know why, but the life spark that animates anything must be something elusive, don't you think? Who knows why we can move and think, eat and sleep? What matters in the end is that we've been given the gift, and we should never forget that. Well said, agreed Joe. But I could still sense the engineer in him swimming in confusion, and he didn't find any comfort talking to a statue. We said our goodbyes, and off they went, leaving Kaylee Joe, Hugin Max, and me to tend to Dr. Grindle. He was alive, but he wasn't conscious. We managed to get him into the Life Seeker and made for the closest place that had all of the provisions we needed, the Bangor Public Library. I was never so happy to see home as I was when that grand old building came into my view. The doors had been ripped off, broken into 1,000 pieces. Grendel must have been here. This was going to take some time to repair. None other than Gregoire, the gargoyle, met me. He was mobile now, having found his legs. Now you come home, eh? Don't expect any parties or anything amazing, eh? This place has been too damn quiet, like a library, eh? Come on, he insisted. This was even more bizarre than watching Paul Bunyan walking around the city. Gregoire stood about 2 feet tall and waddled like a duck with a hernia. He didn't speak so much as he grunted things, but when Kaylee came to the door, his whole demeanor changed. "Oh, my lady! Oh, let me help you. I'm not worthy of your gaze, but let me serve you, huh? Let me carry your things, huh?" And then he said to me in a very loud attempt at a whisper, "Oh, she is beautiful, huh? You leave her alone, you boy. She is mine, I say." And then he took Kaylee's weapon belts and waddled off into the building. "What the?" she said, flabbergasted. "He thinks you're beautiful. I think he's claimed you for his own," I told her. "If looks could kill, I'd be a dead man." And then she said, in a way that only she could utter, "Like hell he has." I thought I'd write this down before I passed out from fatigue. I've made 2 beds out of the chair cushions in the magazine room, one for Dr. Grindle and one for Joe. We've had some cold rations to eat, and we're pretty tired. We're taking shifts sitting at Dr. Grindle's side, and Kaylee is taking the first one. She's sitting on the floor next to him, and every so often she puts some Gatorade between his lips and down his throat. Max is right next to her, and I guess he's not just my dog anymore. In fact, I think he's adopted her, if you know what I mean. Gregoire is next to them, squatting on the floor like he's ready to take a stone dump. He's as quiet as a rock, and since he's made from poured cement, that makes sense. But he's looking over at Kaylee longingly, and every so often she asks, "What are you looking at?" And he answers, "Oh, I am looking at the most beautiful girl on earth." And then she rolls her eyes and ignores him. Brady, said Kaylee, and she shook him back into the world and out of what he considered to be the best night's sleep he had since the abandonment. It had been perfect, with no interference from whisperers or screaming auroras or monsters trying to kill him. "Wake up," she said, and when his eyes began to open into tiny slits, Brady saw her hand raised, ready to slap him if he didn't comply. "What?" he asked sleepily. "Grindle's awake, and he's pretty freaked out. Come on, we need your help," she urged, taking him by the hand. Brady was still in his underwear, and when he arose from the sleeping bag, she let go of his hand, looked at him, paused as she scanned his frame, and said, "Sheesh, will you put on some pants?" He put one leg into his jeans, only to be tugged onward by her, nearly falling to the floor. On the way to the magazine room, he managed to get into the other leg of his jeans while she spoke quickly. "Joe and I have been trying to calm him down, but he's been saying something over and over. Maybe you can help him." "Is he okay in the head, or what?" "Maybe being bonded with Grendel drove him insane," Brady hesitantly asked. "Maybe," she answered. Dr. Peter Grindle, chief investigator of the viral outbreak, creator of the airborne inhalant vaccine program that had inadvertently caused the fall of humanity by acting as a dispersal agent for the virus, sat incoherent on a chair in the magazine room, sweating profusely, babbling beneath his breath. Brady could barely understand him, but he could tell that the doctor wasn't quite with them. Joe sat in the chair next to him, and Gregoire was around the corner behind a bookshelf, having been sent out of the room so his strange presence would not distract the poor doctor any more. He was peeking in like Kilroy around the corner. She's gone. He's gone. End of times. Everyone dead. Oh, long time. My fault. Oh, my fault. I don't understand how. Took precautions. Makes no sense. He went on and on with barely distinct phrases, all obviously connected to the end of things and his final struggle to find a cure. He was as pale as a ghost, and he rocked back and forth slightly in the chair, his hands clutching his own shoulders. His gaze didn't focus on anything in the room, for whatever he saw in his far sight, it wasn't the library. What distant place he gazed upon, one could only guess. Brady could tell that Kaylee and Joe were concerned that they had a madman on their hands. Brady walked slowly up to Dr. Grindle and got down on one knee so that his gaze could meet the doctor's face to face. Then he leaned over and whispered, "Dr. Grindle, Peter, are you there?" The babbling continued. Brady tried another tactic. "We haven't all died, Dr. Grindle. Some of us have survived. Look at me," Brady said, taking the doctor's chin in his hand and turning the doctor's gaze directly into his. "See, we're still here. We need you to come back to us. Please," Brady said simply. "Dr. Grindle, are you still in there?" The doctor stopped babbling for a moment, and his gaze shifted from something just slightly over Brady's shoulder to Brady's eyes. And then a moment of reimagining came, and he said in a whisper, "Where am I? You? I know you. He wanted to kill you." "I'm Brady Smith. This is Kaylee. This is Joe. We're alive, Dr. Grindle. So are you." "Alive?" he said, a look of confusion washing over his pale face, lips trembling. "Alive? No, it's not possible." "Yes, it is. We survived. You survived." "How?" he asked. "I need to know. How?" he asked, as a desperate man whose only purpose in life was encased in the answer to his question. Brady shook his head and looked down at the floor, finding it hard to meet the intensity of the doctor's gaze. "We don't know how, but we're alive, and so are you. And there's a lot for us to tell you, but we need you to relax. Here," said Brady, handing a bottle of water to the doctor. "Drink this. You'll need some food, too," he said, nodding to Kaylee, who complied by rushing down to the small kitchen to make some broth on the small butane camping stove. "Then," he began in a stutter, "then I'm not in hell? I'm not in hell?" Joe shot Brady a look of worry, but Brady understood. Dr. Grindle had spent the last weeks being controlled by something so foul that it must have seemed to him like a demon straight out of the pit. "No, sir, you're not. You're not in heaven either. You're on earth, alive, with the rest of us. Angels and ministers of grace, thank you." "Rest of us? How many?" he inquired shakily. Brady hesitated to answer, but found the truth when he said, "In this part of the world, 3 of us. There are a few more across the planet. Just a handful." Dr. Grindle's bloodshot eyes fell on Kaylee, and the light of recognition dawned in them. He looked at her for a moment and then moved a little closer, obviously agitated by what he beheld. "Kaylee, is that... Can it be that you survived?" She was conflicted. Part of her distinctly remembered having been held captive by this man for many weeks, but she also knew that he had been an unwilling participant in the events that befell them all. Could she hold anger at bay and work with this unfortunate shell of a man? "Yes, I survived," she said coldly. "And," he counted, "there are 3 of you. Kaylee shook her head, her gray eyes boring into his, and said, 3. That's it. 3. So few? Too few. My fault. Dr. Grindle, you need to rest. The doctor settled back into the chair. I thought I'd died and gone to hell. It was torturous. I was chained and beaten. I was held prisoner and no one could see me but him, the devil. It wasn't the devil. It was, and here Brady hesitated before simply saying, well, it was something else. Grendel, I know. Somehow he took hold of me, took me elsewhere. The long hours passed, and Dr. Grindle found himself eating, sleeping, talking, and sleeping again. He was weak, but he found enough strength in small fits to give the trio a good picture of what had happened to him and how the monster had taken over the last of his will and then his body. They were sitting in the magazine room well past nightfall on their second day back in the library. The light came from 2 strong 12-volt lanterns that Brady had discovered at a local RV center. Joe and he had gone on a scavenger hunt of their own to the local automotive parts store, where they took as many deep-cell 12-volt batteries as they could find, as well as a plethora of wiring and connectors. The plan was to charge the batteries for now at the library's generator, but Joe envisioned a small windmill or 2 on the hill behind the building that would charge the batteries and give them ample lighting and power for other appliances. But that would be in the future, which for now looked plausible, even positive. Joe had lists of tools, parts, and devices that would be necessary to build the transmitter he hoped would place them in touch with the people of Radio Ukraine. In fact, as they sat around the warm light of the lanterns, Brady reached down and clicked the wind-up radio off, the nightly broadcast over after only 5 minutes. They aren't saying so, but they're running out of time. The broadcasts are shorter and the signal needs constant readjustment, said Joe with obvious concern. She sounds less positive about things, if that makes any sense. Yes, it does. I felt it too, Kaylee said. We need to get in touch with them as soon as possible. Yeah, I'm working on it, Joe answered as he checked his watch. Today's August 17th. We'll need at least a week, maybe 2. What's the plan, Joe? Insisted Kaylee. When I have a plan, I'll let you know, he replied. You don't have a plan? Asked Brady. Joe gave all of them a stern look and said, only part of one. I need to see if all the components can be found or possibly made. Brady and I'll keep looking tomorrow. Tonight, we need to rest and stay positive. All of you. I don't want that black cloud that followed me for the last 10 years to figure out where I am right now. It might just come back, attracted by your negativity. Besides, I said I'd build you a transmitter, and I damn well mean to do just that. Now, don't rush me. I'm old. They didn't say anything for a long moment until Kaylee said in her own precise and serious way, I don't doubt it at all. It was only then that Dr. Grindle had gained enough strength to tell some of his story. He was still exhausted, and he wore fatigue like a shawl, yet he carefully considered his words. I want to thank you all for what you've done for me. I don't deserve it. I'm ashamed of myself, more than you can imagine, he began. I came north to Bangor in the medical center as it became glaringly clear that this would be our last battleground. Everywhere else the virus took hold, it utterly decimated the population. Even more, I had been the mastermind. It was my idea to test the dispersal process with the kill-the-virus. Nothing out of the ordinary, really. I was in charge of the process of dispersal, not the design of the virus itself. Well, something happened. The killed virus caused the opposite response in humans than what was intended. Instead of giving the body the blueprint which would fight the virus, it turned on the immune system and wouldn't allow it to shut down. It was so carefully planned. I was one of many put in charge of regional response units, but within a week I was the only one still reporting in. We had to use satellite phones in the end. They were the only things that worked. We had uplinks using military satellites and the military internet, but it became apparent that there was no one on the other end of things. No one was receiving our messages. We managed to treat the sick, but our main mission was to further investigate the virus itself and try to discover some way of attacking it on a smaller scale. We needed to get into it somehow and change its coding so that it would elicit a more benign response from the human immune system. And every time I got close to the answer, I was led down pathways that ended up in failure. I don't know what happened. I think I killed someone. Who? I can't remember, he said dismally, looking off into dark corners that none of the others in the room even knew were there. No one in the room knew how to answer his claim. No, Brady finally replied. It wasn't your fault. In the end, Grendel absorbed you. He used your body as his own. If anyone was killed, he was the force behind it, not you. The doctor looked at Brady like he was speaking another language, like he had 3 eyes, like his hair was on fire. Who is Grendel? Joe, Kaylee, and Brady glanced at each other, wondering who would eventually stop and explain to this nearly broken man of science how things had changed while he had been in the belly of the beast. We think that Grendel is a monster created by Brady's force of imagination, answered Joe slowly. We're not sure how or why, but we believe it to be true. Gradually, Dr. Grendel's face began to take on a different look than one of simple confusion. I thought I was in hell. When you woke me, I thought that perhaps I'd just gone mad. I had nothing with which to fight. I'd lost everything, my wife and my boy, he said. Anne? Asked Joe. Stunned, the doctor said, Yes? How do you know her name? Joe took the email he had found in the hospital from his shirt pocket and gently unfolded it, handing it to Peter Grindle, who read it slowly. He read it and reread it in a silence. Tears formed in his eyes and stained his rough cheeks as they made their way down. I killed them, he said, mired in guilt. No, you can't think like that, Dr. Grindle. We've all lost our families, friends, and neighbors, people we love. You're not alone. You didn't create the virus. No one knows where it came from, answered Brady. Kaylee sat down and took Dr. Grindle's hand, examining the missing fingers she had sliced away with Brady's sword. She was still in turmoil, not totally able to forget her weeks of fear and pain. Her silence spoke volumes. I tried to kill you, he asked, still trembling. No, the monster did. He possessed your body, took over. I don't blame you, Dr. Grindle. I understand. Can you remember anything? I remember bits and pieces. I think I remember meeting you, Brady, but, well, that's impossible. That can't have happened. It did, answered Brady. You tried to save me. When I was chained to the stone tower, you spoke to me. The doctor was considering his words carefully. I think I remember moments of, well, I can only call them moments of torment. There was the time in the operations center when almost everyone was gone. I was there. They waited for him to continue, but he stopped as though trying to recall something from the gray edges of his mind. He was having trouble remembering things in their proper order, and many of his memories had been erased or corrupted by his parasitic bond with Grendel. He was trying to remember, and when he made eye contact with Kaylee, he stared intently at her, unblinking. For her part, she made no effort to look away, keeping her firm expression, her eyes boring a hole into his head. I remember being there when the last patient died. He was a soldier sent to protect us, to protect me. The nurse, the only one left besides me, was unaffected by the virus. I didn't know why we weren't affected, but it was the only thing I had. I asked her for some of her blood, and she agreed, but when I analyzed it, there was nothing apparent that would explain her immunity to the disease. I tested my own blood as well, with no success. And I kept looking at the picture of my family, reading and rereading the last communication I would ever have with them. I remember a little more, but it's vague at best. She came over to me and tried to console me, and I remember wishing, oh my God, wishing that I would die too. I didn't want to live. I think that's when I gave up. And then everything went blank. Maybe that's how the monster was able to possess me so easily. I had no fight left. While Brady listened, his heart sank as he tried to conjure up the image of his mother's visitation too, and the sound of her voice. He could only imagine what happened next, but he stopped himself. There were some things he decided best left behind, unremembered. He didn't want to hear any more about his mother, not now. You went blank because at that moment Grendel logged on and booted up. He took control of your conscious mind and your body, which he intended to possess, in a parasitic fashion. He used you as a mode of transportation, as a house in which to live, while he did his business, explained Joe, postulating. In a way, he consumed you, Kaylee said. I know. I fought him, tooth and nail. I know you aren't him. You were broken and he took advantage of you at your worst moment. That's when he entered you and began to dominate you. Maybe he never caught me because you fought against him underneath. They were quiet while the weight of things settled upon Peter Grindel's shoulders. Every now and then they could hear him mouth a word or two, but it was clear to them that he was recalling things, remembering, digging deeply into the black coal mine made of memory. Somewhere down there, it must still be waiting. I remember a ceremony. I remember creatures in the night. I can recall the corridors of the hospital and hunting something. Perhaps you, Kaylee. I remember a great fight, and I remember the Northern Lights? That's right, Brady explained. Grendel had some kind of power over nature. He could summon the lightning. That's how he burned down the city with a lightning storm. Yes, I remember lightning. Is this true? Can it be true? He asked again, pleading for a different answer. It's true, Kaylee answered. Cross my heart and hope to die. Oh, no, don't say that, he said gravely. Why not? She asked innocently. Because, he managed to utter. I remember the battle with the giant. He threw me into the water. That's when Grendel unhooked his claws from my mind and soul and flew away. I watched him fly away like a firefly, like a will-o'-the-wisp. I watched him, a small ball of light against the night sky. You don't think you destroyed him, do you? He made it to the shore and chose another host. I saw him rise up and lope away on all fours. Was it a dog? They sat in stony silence until Brady said quietly, "Oh my God, he's still alive." End of chapter.